The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Why Marketers Need Dashboards. This webinar is jointly presented by Clubfolio and Strategent. We have a really fun presentation today that's going to seek to answer the question why every marketer needs a dashboard, from your CMO, VP, and director level marketers right down to the operations and specialists within your organization. Throughout the presentation, we're going to provide a lot of practical advice for starting and being successful with your marketing dashboard project. Just before we get going, a few housekeeping rules. If you're like me and you're an avid tweeter, you might want to know about our event hashtag, which is #GotDashboards. It'll be located in the bottom left corner of the slides throughout the presentation. Feel free to ping us at Twitter. Both Strategent and Clubfolio will be monitoring the Twitter stream today. And of course, at the end of the presentation, we're going to provide ample opportunity to answer all of your questions, so don't be shy. Save up your questions till the end, and then we'll make sure to address them as we go. Okay, so let's introduce the presenters today. First of all, we have Michelle Malot, Clubfolio's Chief Marketing Officer. Myself, Jonathan Taylor, I'm Digital Marketing Manager here at Clubfolio. And then Erin Cropper, who's joining us from Strategent. She's Director of Customer Success. We're very fortunate to have her on the webinar today. So let me pass over control to Michelle, and she'll take us through her part of the presentation.
Great, thanks a lot, John, and welcome everyone. So specifically, we're going to answer 4 questions about why marketers need dashboards. The first is the macro question of why do marketers need dashboards? The second is what metrics and KPIs matter to marketers? The third question is what does a marketing dashboard even look like, and how can I build one? And the last question, I think this is the most important question ultimately, is what do I need to know to make my dashboard project a raving success? Okay, so let's start with why do marketers need dashboards? It's really a very simple answer to that question. Marketers need dashboards to answer a really basic question that we all have. How are we doing? It's simple at the surface, but the question is actually many questions, because it's never just how are we doing at the top level. It's how are we doing in SEO? How are we doing on our email campaigns? How are we doing in social media, on advertising, in our events? How did we do last month? How are we doing this month? And more and more and more, and John knows this probably better than anyone, how are we doing right now? I think marketers have become much more interested in understanding the inter-hour dynamics of their efforts, not just the intraday. Answering this question requires data from a lot of cloud services. Your email services that are sitting on the cloud, your web analytics services, your CRM services, your marketing automation, your social media, your SEO, and there are so many more. Every day I discover yet another cloud service that can help marketing, advocate marketing, etc. And answering it also requires data that's sitting in your premises. Data from your corporate databases, your warehouses, from your ERP systems, data from your email, and data from spreadsheets. And answering this simple question often, very often, requires data from multiple cloud services and databases at the same time. For example, if you wanted to know how your new campaign that you just launched is impacting sales today, you would need at minimum to get data from your CRM system, from your marketing automation system, and from your web analytics system if you're on the web and doing business that way. So how are most marketing organizations getting the answer to that simple question today? Well, most are using what we lovingly call the quarterly marketing presentation, which, as you can see from this really complex image, is put together usually by 1 or 2 key people in the marketing department, the analyst or the operations person, put together from a whole host of original sources. Some of them are the cloud services that they're using. So somebody will go to Twitter and Facebook or Marketo and get some data, put it into a PowerPoint presentation, And it's many, 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 many hours of cutting and pasting from all of these different data sources that they're accessing. It's also hours of analyzing the data, trying to make sense of it, because most of it is coming from a functional perspective. So the web team's going to provide to that analyst, here are the web performance statistics they need. The programs area is going to deliver the digital and event type data, etc. So it's very functionally focused, very siloed, and there is a huge opportunity cost to this monthly or quarterly presentation process. For example, let's say you discover that in that presentation that your AdWords spend was doing really well to mid-quarter, and then it started to degrade, but your spend in another area, for example, maybe your social media advertising spend, really rocketed. And if you can only compare that at the end of the quarter and not during the time period that it was happening, you've lost the opportunity to optimize that particular part of your marketing mix. But as you might have guessed, there is a better way. And a marketing dashboard is that better way. So I'm going to explore with you now why marketing dashboard is a better way to do this. First of all, it answers the how are we doing question regardless of where the information is coming from. So it could be coming from your cloud services, from your Excel spreadsheets, from your emails. And it becomes your single place for all the key metrics that you need to track on a regular basis. And it's always on. It's always tracking. It's always giving you the answers you need in the time frame you need them. So some answers you only need once a week, maybe once a month. Some answers you need by the minute or by the hour, depending on what it is that you're doing in the marketplace. So marketing dashboards take you from this reflective quarterly performance management culture and viewpoint, where you have a lot of both lost opportunity and potentially lost actual revenue, to a culture and an environment of continuous optimization. So let's now move on to see what KPIs and metrics matter. And for that, I'm going to pass it over to Erin.
All right, thanks, Michelle. So no doubt, if you have done any sort of marketing dashboards or worked with your marketing department, I don't have to tell you why KPIs are. The key things that you really need to keep in mind with KPIs for your marketing dashboard are that they provide clarity. Basically, they tell you what's important, where the changes happened, how we've been performing in context with past performance or targets or benchmarks that we've set, and they also help to create consensus amongst the people in the organization so we all agree on what it is that is important. Now, despite what many people will tell you, defining KPIs doesn't have to be hard. It should actually be pretty easy if you really know what it is that you're looking at. And the question you're trying to answer is, why does this exist in the first place, and is it doing what it's supposed to do? So let's look at some examples of some web KPIs that might help to get you thinking about the way that we go through the process of defining them. So typically when we start looking at KPIs, the most important thing that you really need to think about is what objectives it is that your site, your marketing department, your initiatives are actually attempting to do. So there are a lot of different objectives that you could have. This is not an exhaustive list by any stretch of the imagination. Depending on the complexity of the site or of your marketing initiatives, you can have as little as 2 or maybe even up to 5 objectives. And some things you might want to think about would be like reach. So for example, if you're a new brand and you're trying to reach a large number of, trying to reach a new audience, you might want to have some KPIs defined around how successful you are in getting your messaging out there. If you're trying to engage people with content or with a social media campaign that you've put together, you might want to have some campaign or some metrics around that. Most websites usually focus on some sort of conversion, so that might be another objective that you would look toward. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but typically we start by looking at what are the key things that we're trying to do at a very high level and then go from there. So once you've defined your objectives, what we typically try to do is to split our metrics into two key components. So there are two major types. The first one is your KPIs, and these are the hard numbers that actually drive your business. The numbers where if it went down to zero, someone would really freak out, right? So if revenue on your e-commerce site dropped down to nothing, that would be a really big problem. Now, I know some people like to say that KPIs should only be percentages, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that you should have these numbers, the ones that are really going to tell you how you're doing, and then use those percentages and other indicators as diagnostic metrics. So we kind of pair up key performance indicators with metrics that help to provide some context as to why they're performing the way that they are. So for example, you might look at something like top products by revenue or top channels by orders, basically where if you saw a big swing in one of your KPIs, you would be able to look at some of these diagnostic metrics to determine why it is exactly that those things change and give you some clues as to where you should start looking in your reports and in your different tools aside from just your dashboard. Now, that might not be enough for just your dashboard. Maybe it doesn't tell the entire story. So there are a couple of other types of KPIs that you could use as well. The first would be smoke alarms. And this is basically something that tells you if something has gone horribly wrong. So for example, if you have searches on your website and they don't have any results, this would be a good place to determine if something is broken. Another thing that you might want to look at would be a predictor or a leading indicator. So basically, how is this going to perform moving forward? Online survey results. So if you're using a tool that actually gives you voice of the customer data or something like this, you can actually include that information about their intent to purchase or some sort of a conversion proxy to see how things will perform moving forward. And then finally, you might want to include some latent metrics as well. So things that don't necessarily change on a regular basis, but that might give you some hints as to where there are some opportunities. So competitive data or some customer satisfaction scoring from, again, one of your online survey tools or even some market research or things like this. These might be things that are useful to include as well. Now, a couple of key tips for KPIs. The first is to minimize. It's really tough to take action if you have too many KPIs, so cut them down as much as possible. The next is to provide context. No number is useful or tells a story in and of itself. So make sure that you have some sort of context, be it a target, a benchmark, a comparison to a relevant time frame, or something like that. You also need to make sure to adjust frequently. So even though you've set up your KPIs, you're not finished. Anytime something changes with your marketing initiatives, with your site, if you've gone through a leadership change or a reorganization, it's a good idea to adjust and make sure that what was important before is still important now. And finally, make sure to be accountable. Everybody needs to agree on what the KPIs are, or else no one is going to take them seriously, and you're going to find yourself having a dashboard that's filled with numbers that no one really pays attention to. Now, a couple of key pitfalls that we've seen with a number of our clients: make sure not to include things on your dashboard that are too complicated. So for example, I have a lot of clients who like to look at, on their website, pathing analysis, and that's something that they think is really interesting. But typically that's too complex to really show that story on a dashboard. So think judiciously about what you can include and what would actually be useful and helpful versus what's going to be confusing. The other thing you want to make sure is that your KPIs are actually all part of the same story. So just because you have a KPI does not mean that you have to include it. If it doesn't really lend to the story you're telling, cut it and put it somewhere else. And then finally, if you have bad data or no data, you want to make sure to exclude those things from your dashboard. The last thing that you want to do is include something that's half-baked on your dashboard and then have a lot of people asking questions about what they're seeing. What it'll do is eventually cause all sorts of issues with data confidence, and it can take a really long time to build that back up. So if you have questions about the quality of the data, you're better served to omit those things. Now, when we design dashboards, the big thing that we want to keep in mind is that we can make this story much easier to read by basically aligning things to a specific layout. So as you can see, on the left-hand side, we have a 3 or 6 column layout, and on the right-hand side we have a 4 or 8 column layout. And the reason that we advocate doing this is because it makes it a lot easier for people to really see what's going on. The eye moves more naturally through something like this. We try to align the elements to a grid as much as possible, and then in addition to that, we placement importance to show exactly what it is that they should be focusing on. So your most important stuff goes in the top left, and then your important stuff goes across the top, kind of like reading a book. Makes it much easier for people to determine what they should be looking at. And then in addition, we always try to place related things together. So the key metrics might go across the top, referral sources, top 10 lists of campaigns or social media posts or things like that will go along the bottom. But in this case, if you keep related things together, it'll make it much, much easier for people to understand. So now I'd like to hand this back over to John to give us a demo of how a marketing dashboard, how we can build a marketing dashboard and what one would look like.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Erin. So I'm going to switch over and pop up a Klipfolio dashboard. So bear with me a moment, and we'll be looking at Klipfolio in just a second. Okay, so right now we're looking at the My Dashboard section of Klipfolio dashboard. This is where people, monitor the dashboard, take a look at the key metrics, the KPIs, the data that they want to monitor. As you can see, what I've done here is I've actually created 4 distinct tabs to monitor different areas of my business, of my digital marketing performance. One of the most commonly asked questions about Klipfolio and dashboarding in general from a marketing perspective is social media. And this social media dashboard really highlights a key component, I think, that should be available in any dashboard that you build, and that's bringing together multiple services into a single view. You're going to hear me talk about this multiple times throughout the demonstration. The key point on this dashboard is being able to bring together things like your Twitter stats, your LinkedIn stats, your Facebook stats, and YouTube stats into a single view where everything is automated and pulled in on a regular basis, on an hourly or by minute basis. So you don't have to go into the reporting tools, native to these social media platforms, Twitter Analytics or Facebook Insights, to be able to understand how you're performing at a high level on any one of these areas. The other big benefit of working with dashboards, and I think it's a really important thing to emphasize, is the interactivity of dashboards. So right now I'm looking at some high-level Twitter stats, and I have a question. I want to scratch below the surface and really understand how I'm performing on Twitter. What I can do is click on this hyperlink, and this will spawn a new dashboard that will allow me to take a look at my Twitter performance, take a much closer look at how I'm performing on Twitter using some other digital marketing services. So in this case here, you can see I have my standard Twitter stats pulled across the top, and now at the bottom I'm actually collecting data from Google Analytics to understand how my my Twitter campaigns are resulting in new web visitors, how they're generating new leads, and what the goal completion rate or goal conversion rate of those leads are that come from Twitter. Is a great indicator of whether my Twitter campaigns are resulting in more traffic, more leads, not just increasing my visibility on this specific platform. And I think this point around combining data from multiple platforms is really important. And I want to highlight this with the Marketing Funnel tab. The key point around the Marketing Funnel is the ability to combine multiple data sources to get a complete view of your marketing performance. This is actually built on based on a dashboard that I built out for Michelle to expose how we're performing across our marketing funnel. You can see I've on this visualization here, the key metrics visual, I'm pulling data from 3 different sources, 3 distinct sources, to be able to tell how am I performing across my leads or my marketing funnel. I'm pulling from Google Analytics to see the number of visitors I've had for this period, the number of leads coming from my marketing automation tool, something like a HubSpot or a Marketo, and then the number of wins coming from my CRM, something like Salesforce or other CRMs. And now that's really a key point, but I think where you start to extract some really great value from a dashboard is when you can combine data from multiple services to start doing some calculations. So you can see I'm taking visitors from Google Analytics and comparing it to leads to generate my lead visitor to lead conversion rate. And you can also see that I have, throughout the funnel, I can take a look at how I'm converting from one aspect of the funnel to the other. I'm using some indicator lights here just as a dashboard design principle to call out the areas where I'm performing well and also the areas that I'm performing poorly. Now the data management part is really hugely important to be able to provide me with a comprehensive view of what my marketing performance is doing. The other part that I think is really important is when I present this to my CMO, that she has the ability to interact with this dashboard and answer some questions that she may have. And that's where this drop-down menu at the top comes into play. Is now she has the ability to take a look and summarize all my lead performance across the past 12 months, or maybe look and see how we performed on a particular month. So that ability to say, you know, in September, I seem to remember we had a marketing campaign. How did it perform, and how did the funnel change to reflect that performance? So one thing with these two dashboards that I built out, these are custom dashboards that we built out, and they're based on examples that we use internally to monitor. The next two dashboards I'm going to show you are actually dashboards that you can generate yourself using our ClipStart functionality. I'll show you how that works at the end of my demonstration. But for now, I just want to kind of show you these two dashboards. So first and foremost, we have the ability to automatically generate a dashboard for Google AdWords. This is a great overview of your AdWords performance and provides a rich data set for information that is usable for multiple different levels within your marketing organization. Somebody like the CMO will be able to jump into this dashboard and instantly see, you know, top-line metrics like conversion rates or ROI, return on investment. Analyst types, you know, somebody who's working within AdWords also has the ability to see things, you know, metrics that are really familiar, click-through rates, cost per click, cost per conversion, as well as the ability to drill in and understand how your keywords are performing at an ad group level and then at the keyword level themselves and see some specific metrics about that. Those are really comprehensive overview of what you get with your AdWords. The other key part of this is the ability to filter on different campaigns within your AdWords account. So being able to see things like, you know, if I want to look at how I'm performing on my bicycle and gear campaign, I can apply those changes, take a look, and the dashboard will automatically update to provide me with that view about that data. And the same goes with the time period. So I have the ability to take a look at what's my last 30-day performance on this particular campaign, and then I can submit those results and have those appear in front of me. The other dashboard I'd like to talk about is the Google Analytics dashboard. Again, this dashboard allows you to, you can generate this dashboard just by signing up for a trial of Klipfolio dashboard, and it provides a great view of your web analytics performance. So it allows you to take a look at some key metrics such as, you know, number of users, number of sessions, page views, some division between, you know, your mobile users versus desktop users, and some content marketing KPIs, website performance behavior metrics like bounce rate, page views, new sessions, and time on site. Again, a key component of this dashboard itself is the ability to use filters to switch between multiple websites. So if you're a marketing agency working with multiple clients, or you're an organization that has multiple domains underneath of a single account, you can quickly toggle back and forth to get data on that particular web domain, as well as filter through different time periods, you know, answering those questions and having that interactivity to pose questions to your dashboard like, I wonder how I'm performing in the last 90 days, and then comparing it to the period immediately preceding that. Of course, you also want to answer that question and compare it to the values in the previous year, so same period in the last year. So I'm going to show you how you can set that up. I saw a question come through while I was demonstrating this about how to set this up on your dashboard. So you know what, you can do this exactly following the steps that I'm going to show you now. So go ahead, click on the Add a Tab button, and then you notice that this wonderful little section here, ClipStarts, and we just added this to the dashboard today. And then you can add one of two different dashboards. You can add Google Analytics or Google AdWords. Now I'm going to go ahead and add the Google Analytics tab. And then you can see here I have a selection of tokens that I can use. If you need to add a new token, it's really easy to set it up. You know, just make sure that you're signing up with your correct Google account. And I'll just select one of these dashboards, and you notice that it generates the dashboard automatically for you. So it's really quick and easy. Now I do want to drop a little hint about a big feature that we have coming out in the next month or so. I assure you that the ClipStarts is just a hint at some of the future developments that we have in the works here. Some really great stuff that we plan on developing for you guys that's going to make it really easy to get services, everything from social media. Social media is hugely valuable to people, as well as services like Google Analytics, Salesforce, and beyond. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be a really exciting piece of news for us. And as you can see, the dashboard has been generating here for a minute, and I'm looking at some of the websites that we actually monitor here at Klipfolio. Okay, so I'm going to pass it back to Erin and let her continue with the presentation. Just bear with me as I bring up the slideshow presentation. And of course, feel free if you have any questions about the demonstration part of this, happy to answer those at the end of the presentation. Okay, thanks. It's all yours, Erin.
All right, thanks, John. Okay, so for the last piece of this, let's talk a little bit about how you can make your dashboard project a success. So we've worked with a number of different companies, and we've seen a lot of different dashboard projects. Some of them are much more successful than others, and what we've noticed is that most dashboard projects fail in one of the following 4 areas. Either they have unclear requirements, the timelines expand, they have bad or no data, or they have a general lack of understanding throughout the organization. So let's talk about each of those a little bit more in depth. The first real pitfall is unclear requirements, which make it really difficult to design a dashboard that meets the needs of your audience. So there are a couple of key problems that might happen here. First and foremost, you might find that your executives are looking for different KPIs or time frame comparisons than what you've provided for them. So in order to address this, what we strongly suggest is creating a comprehensive list of requirements at the very beginning of your project and getting sign-off on them before moving forward in the design phase at all. This will save you a lot of rework, and if there are any conversations to be had about changes, you can do that much earlier on and it shouldn't be an issue. The next one is that you might find that visual design elements don't necessarily match up with what the people in your organization want to see. So we've addressed that by asking our audience at the very beginning, during the requirements gathering phase, if there are particular things that they want. Color schemes, if they like specific visualization types or things of this nature. There are definitely a lot of visualization best practices out there, but a lot of it also comes down to personal preference, and in many cases it's just easier to ask, so that's what we recommend doing. And then finally, we'll find that you end up with a situation where you don't have your data sources or your metric definitions very well defined, and then this can cause some confusion amongst the people who are viewing the dashboard as well as amongst the team trying to create it. So what we recommend doing here is during your requirements gathering phase, actually get those data sources and metric definitions very solidly defined for the technical team during the requirements phase, and again, get sign-off on those as well. So overall, the biggest thing to think about here is just to make sure that you gather requirements very comprehensively and force a sign-off phase as well. It should help quite a bit. The next thing that we see a lot of is expanding timelines, and no doubt all of you have seen this in some of your projects. It's scheduled to be launched in June, and it delays and delays and delays, and then by December we're lucky to get something out the door. There are a few things that we can do to avoid this, though, and that can really help in terms of getting your timeline scheduled a little bit better. So the first thing that we've seen is that you have some problems with technical access issues, and as Michelle mentioned earlier, there can be so many different data sources that you're pulling from. What you want to do is start your project right after the business requirements phase with a technical requirements phase. So going through and determining the access for all of your data sources, figuring out all of the needs of your technical team, and getting everything tested. But when you're ready to automate your dashboard, you are ready to go, and it's nice and easy. Another thing that you'll see here is that changing requirements will often force extra work once the build has begun. So if somebody goes back and looks and says, oh, well, I didn't actually want those KPIs on here, I don't like this design, you've already started building, that can create a lot of rework and will really expand your time frame. So again, we really recommend creating sign-off milestones for all of your requirements phases, your business and technical phase. And then from a design phase perspective, what we typically recommend is doing a phase of wireframes, doing some large-scale revisions if needed, and then moving into a phase of tweaks where it's just small that would need to be changed, and then again forcing a sign-off phase to make sure that everybody understands exactly what's there and that everyone agrees. Finally, one thing that we see quite a bit of is that there are some tweaks that are needed to your underlying data structure, and those aren't necessarily considered in the initial time frame that you've proposed for everyone. So what we recommend doing is after you have your technical requirements sign off, that we have both teams, business and technical, take a look at the time frame and determine if that is still feasible. If they need to create custom reports, if there need to be adjustments in order to get the data, at this point you have the opportunity to reevaluate and determine if it needs to change, and then you can set those expectations accordingly. Now, one of the biggest things that will jettison any dashboard project is having bad or no data in your dashboard. And dashboards with bad data, as I mentioned previously, will really only undercut the confidence of stakeholders in your dashboard. So a couple of things to think about here. So the first thing to think about is that you might have reports for some of your key KPIs that don't have sufficient data. What we recommend doing is during the business requirements phase, so once you've finished getting all of those requirements signed off, having the technical team go through and look at the data to make sure that you have what you need. If you don't, then that's the time to address this and determine if we should sub something else in or if we should adjust the way that we're looking at it to make sure that we've got enough. Another thing that we've seen quite a bit of is that you have custom reports that needed to be created and they weren't ready for the launch of the dashboard. So again, here we recommend in the technical requirements phase looking through all of those business requirements, determining if there are other things that need to be created, and if so, adding that into your timeline with a re-estimation at the end of the requirements phase. And then finally, something that is a little bit less common, but we've seen with quite a few clients, is that you may have some really complex requirements, be it segmentation or something like this, that force the presentation of a data set that isn't really big enough to be super significant. In those cases, a lot of times what we've found is that the stakeholders just really didn't understand exactly how small the data set that they were looking at was going to be. So one thing you can do is work with them to see if there is a larger data set that you can use. If that's not the case, then what you need to do is use caveats and make sure that there is lots of education, which brings me to my next point, which is that the final thing, and this is probably the most dangerous, is that a lack of understanding throughout the organization can really harm your dashboard projects. So make sure that you're providing a solid understanding to the business so that they know just what they're looking at. There are a couple of key potential problems here. So in some cases, you might find that your stakeholders don't really understand what data points are represented on the dashboard. So what you want to do is, again, ensure that those requirements are very well documented and that everyone agrees on them. And then create a data dictionary so that they can self-reference those and won't be constantly pulling on your marketing team trying to ask questions. It's just available there at their fingertips, and then they can automatically kind of pick that up and figure out what they're looking at. Another thing that we see quite a bit of is that it's not necessarily always immediately clear what's important and what changes are significant. And I touched on this earlier, but we want to make sure to design with the most important elements at the top left and then use color to highlight changes and things that are important. So be strategic in the way that you're designing. Make sure that everything that you put into your design is done that way for a reason. Because even if it wasn't done for a reason, if you're using specific colors or things like this, people will automatically infer meaning from them. And then finally, and this is perhaps, kind of ties in with the one before with the bad data, but you'll want to make sure that your data caveats and other important footnotes are clear to your users of the dashboard so that they're not confused about what they're looking at. We recommend using annotations and analysis whenever possible, and then make sure that at the end of your dashboard project, you really launch it with a rollout phase with a knowledge transfer. Make sure that everybody has the opportunity to ask questions and look at the dashboard and really understand what's going on. So that concludes the best practices for ensuring a successful dashboard project. So I'll hand this back to John for questions.
Well, thanks everyone for attending today's webinar. I implore you to check out both Stratagen and Klubfolio. You can find Stratagen at www.stratagen.com, and you can visit Klubfolio at www.klubfolio.com. Of course, we're going